And at a certain point, Canadians are going to start thinking, what's the point of listening to someone who doesn't deliver their rhetoric?
And just like that, Pierre Poilievre explains the real reason behind the Liberals and Liberal-funded media just attacking him so consistently. And honestly, the truth of it all made me feel nothing but relieved and very hopeful, actually. I'm Jasmine Lane. Subscribe, like, follow, and comment your thoughts down below. Mark Carney is laughing off Alberta yet again and trying to sell the country on an energy superpower sacrifice plan that doesn't include energy and also doesn't include a way to get that energy anywhere. And if that makes no sense to you, you're not alone. But according to one of his top ministers, that's just because you're stupid. Yeah, it's your fault that you don't understand what they're trying to do, which they can't even themselves explain because it makes no sense, but it's your fault for not being able to make sense of what they can't make sense of. It makes no sense.
It is no surprise to me that there is no heavy oil pipeline on this list because there is no route, there is no proponent, there is no project. It is a figment of a communication person's mind in Alberta. And it has no connection to real investment in our country or in our province. If it goes ahead, it will only be because it is fully funded by taxpayers to the tune of $40 to $50 billion. And we already have a publicly owned pipeline that is not operating at capacity and could take on significant additional capacity. I remain frustrated that this appears to be an ongoing issue for Premier Smith. We've got so many things to work on together that could make a meaningful difference for her province and ours, whether it's around electricity rates in Alberta, whether it's around access to Tidewater for key products, whether it's around just working closely together as each other's major trading partners in Canada. So the door remains open. But let's be honest with ourselves, that pipeline is not happening, and that's why it's not on the list.
Pierre Poilievre had a hilarious response to this, by the way. But I want to show you this graph before we go ahead and fact check David Eby, of course. GDP per capita in 2024, and it's comparing Canadian provinces to American states. Let's just go take a, oh gosh, there's Alberta, first on the list at 20th. My gosh, that's pretty good, hey? And you scroll down a little bit. Where on British Columbia? Oh, there you are at 46th. I wonder why Alberta's at 20th and British Columbia is at 46. Maybe you can help me answer that question.
Some people say, well, David Eby is going to oppose a pipeline from Alberta to the Pacific. And my answer to that is, who cares? He has no power to block an intra-provincial pipeline. It is a federal responsibility. So Mark Carney will try to use David Eby as an excuse for not allowing a pipeline to go ahead. That is not an excuse. The Constitution is very clear on this point. The federal government has the power to go ahead even if the provincial government does not agree. And I'm going to be very clear. Mark Carney still hasn't stated his position on a pipeline to the Pacific. He still doesn't know what he thinks on the subject 8 months after taking the job. As Prime Minister, I would use my federal legal authority to rapidly permit a pipeline from Hardisty, Alberta to Prince Rupert or Kitimat so that we can move 1 million barrels of Western Canadian oil to 2.5 billion energy-hungry customers in Asia.
Now let's fact check David Eby, shall we? Because you do also hear this very much parroted on mainstream media and out of the Liberal government's own mouth from time to time. He says there's no route, no proponent, no project. It's all just a big figment of Alberta's imagination. Well, the lie detector test has determined that is a lie. There is a proponent, there is a route, and Alberta is actually not imagining anything. Proposed by Pathways Alliance, which includes some of the biggest developers in our country, supported by the Alberta government because our regulatory conditions force them to do so. And the conceptual route is along the same corridors that already carry energy infrastructure. So, and also, by the way, designed specifically to move heavy oil to Tidewater, not LNG, not light crude. By the way, Pathways Alliance represents about 95% of Canada's oil sands production. That's a proponent, and a big one. But why does David Eby phrase it in such a way to make you feel like this is just some fake imagination BS? Well, hypothetically, if he were to acknowledge that the project is real, that would then force him to explain why British Columbia opposes pipelines, why TMX took and spent so much more money than it needed to, why Carney refuses to claim that we're going to diversify trade while refusing to expand export capacity on all fronts, by the way. Like, this isn't just specific to oil. I mean, oil's our number one, obviously, but like with everything, when it comes to critical minerals and everything, there's no export capacity that's really being designed that's going to be done in the next 6 months or year, as an example, even though it could be. And also why British Columbia is demanding net zero compliance that makes new builds like this virtually impossible. So calling it imaginary, getting all emotional and huffy puffy about it, allows him to dodge the real question. That's probably as deep as that gets. And also for him to say, oh, if it goes ahead, it's going to be taxpayer funded with $40 to $50 billion. Well, a couple things here. Number one, let's say that was the truth. And if Albertans voted for that and they wanted that to be what the Alberta government uses their tax dollars for, that is their democratic right to do. So just going to throw that out there. But also that claim alone is incredibly misleading, because the only reason taxpayer funding would even be required and is even in the question is because Ottawa has made pipelines unfinanceable through regulation. That's why.
James, I think what's also interesting, though, is that, to my knowledge, at least at this point, none of these 10 or so or 11 projects actually requires them to be declared as in the national interest with C5, meaning it doesn't require the government to subvert an existing law, be it environmental or otherwise, in order to move forward with it, which is less risk politically than stuff that would require C5, which says something, I think.
You know, we all read a lot of the polls. Mark Carney has a leadership advantage over Pierre Poilievre right now. His party seems to be in sturdy shape and continuing its broad level of support from the last campaign, even though the top line numbers relative to the Conservatives are tight. Still waiting for him to risk some of his political capital. Still waiting for him to show that he's really going to take some risks in the national interest. I mean, we were told that the first list of 5 projects was a start, and you know, we knew that some of the projects were going to be already kind of half-baked, and they were already kind of in the process of being completed. So kind of don't worry about it. Wait for the second tranche. Well, and the second tranche will maybe bring a little bit more drama. I hope the Grey Cup has a little bit more drama than the Grey Cup list that we saw today.
Joe Rogan has been incredibly honest about all sorts of things, and one of those things has been stem cells. And the fact that stem cells, if you don't know, are like tiny little repair crews in your body, and they go and fix things that need to be fixed. Joe Rogan has been ahead of this curve. He's been talking about this for years. Just watch.
I had a full-length rotator cuff tear, and the UFC gave me a doctor in Los Angeles, and he looks at my MRI and goes, "You're going to need surgery." I go, 100%? He goes, "I don't know how you're using it now. It's a matter of time. You're going to need surgery, so it might be better to do it now." So I got it shot up with stem cells. And this was the early days of stem cells in America, where you could get away with more. You got to go to Mexico now again.
The crazy part is that most stem cell therapies are illegal in the US, not because they're unsafe or anything like that, not because they don't work, but because they work a little bit too well and they threaten big pharma. Fair enough. If you could heal your knees, fix your back, recover from surgery without pills, insurance, or endless doctor's visits, well, what would happen to their profits, right? The FDA has blocked these treatments, and as a result, people are forced to go overseas just to get access to their own biology. It's expensive, it's unregulated, and out of reach for most of us. Just one placenta stem cell injection can run you back 50 grand. But what most people don't know is that there's a natural way to support your own stem cell activity, and it comes from high flavanol cocoa. Studies have shown that flavanols in cocoa stimulate stem cells to come out of your bone marrow. Harvard scientist Dr. William Lee actually backs this up.
So, studies have been done to show that the flavanols in cocoa stimulate stem cells to come out of your bone marrow like bees in a beehive in your bloodstream, and they go out and they find wherever it needs to be repaired. If it's in your heart, they'll fix it. If it's in your liver, they'll fix it. If it's in your skin, they'll fix it.
Yes, dark chocolate. But the thing is, flavanols are the good stuff found in cocoa beans, but they're usually destroyed during the chocolate making process. And that is where Black Forest Supplements comes in. They've created the first ever high flavanol cocoa powder. This isn't regular cocoa, it's stem fuel, packed with everything your body actually needs, 20 calories, no sugar, and great to mix in your shakes or your coffee. If you feel old, slow, a little off, maybe just lazy, stem cells might be why. But this, it flips the switch. Over 100% increase in stem cell circulation. Plus, right now you can get a whopping buy one, get one free for 48 hours only. The link is in the description and pinned comment. Don't miss it.
Because it was a little bit, frankly, disappointing for those of us who are looking for a prime minister to risk some political capital in exchange for advancing the national interest. The LNG project, for example, in British Columbia, as I understand the details, the federal government announced that they're loaning $140 million from the infrastructure bank to BC Hydro to complete the project is like $8 to $10 billion. This is like a 2% funding announcement. Good, but hardly something that is, going to have Donald Trump anxious that they're going to lose Canada as an economic pillar and have us massively exploiting global markets. So, look, it was a good day, but I don't think it's a day that really lived up to the hype. And I think that's something that I think the Prime Minister needs to be anxious about, is that he continues to massively promise and raise expectations and continues to underdeliver. He did it in his budget last week. He did it with the 5 projects today. And at a certain point, Canadians are going to start thinking, what's the point of listening to someone who doesn't deliver their rhetoric?
And that is critically important to the conversation. And it's also why listening to David Eby makes you just want to ram your face through a bag of bricks. I don't know what that means, but I'm sure you get the frustration level by saying it. And the hypocrisy here, too, is just, I have no words. Oh, it's taxpayer funded. That's so unacceptable. Oh, really? Well, I mean, $31 billion on TMX, that was publicly funded, and you're bragging about it right now. It didn't need to be, by the way. The reason why it was due to Ottawa and their federal bureaucracy. With $13.2 billion roughly has been spent so far on EV battery subsidies and plants, most of which have actually since closed down shop. They've halted some of their chains. Jobs have been lost. Money has been absolutely wasted. There's also been $700 million federally spent on clean tech hydrogen facilities, billions more in innovative strategic funds, 40+ billion on the very national building projects list that David Eby is like, see, that's why they didn't put it on there. Of course, he ever so conveniently fails to mention the subsidies and grants and all this other BS that the federal government is throwing at these projects just to keep them here after half of them have been waiting in regulatory limbo for the last couple of years. Like, get wrecked, dude.
Western LNG is the owner of the Xilisms terminal, and it would be built in Korea with Korean and Chinese steel. So how much taxpayer money are we prepared to invest in a project that is American-owned and foreign-built?
There are different aspects of the project, as I said. There is the PRGT pipeline, which is necessary, which is Canadian owned, First Nation. Sorry, can I finish? There is the associated transmission line that comes there. There are structures that come with projects that ensure that there is returns to taxpayers through the tax system as well. And the structure of the financing is a decision that we take with the full information of the project design. So that's part of, we answer that question with full information by doing the work, and that's what the referral to the major project office facilitates.
I don't know what language you just spoke, Mr. Carney, but it definitely was an economic genius, world-renowned banker who's going to save our country at all.
If I recall, prior to them being that project being put on the list, they had already been saying that they would make a final investment decision in early next year. So being put on the list didn't exactly accelerate the certainty with which you're saying, your government is providing investors like LNG Canada.
So I know your audience doesn't always have complete clarity on how these projects work. But there are a huge number of decisions still for the proponent to make. There were a number of things they needed from the federal and provincial government that through the Major Projects Office were coordinated between the federal government and the provincial government, and that clarity has been provided to the proponents. There's 5 different equity proponents for LNG Canada 2. They say they have what they need from us now, and they will be making their decision in the spring. So we have significantly advanced the likelihood that we will see a final investment decision in the spring.
They had also raised the prospect of more certainty around GHG. And our audience will know, and certainly I have clarity around the fact that there are a bunch of companies basically that together form LNG Canada, and some of them have made their own requests for more clarity and certainty around your GHG policy as well. In the budget, your government said basically that the emissions cap could be removed, predicated, though, on a number of different things happening, including the strengthening of the industrial price on carbon, but you did not define what that meant. Why not create the certainty when you had the chance?
I'll spare you his remaining answer, which is essentially a whole lot of nothing.
Is oil pipelines, and that's the one that isn't on the list, so I'm a bit perplexed by that. But no, absolutely. I think that this is an important moment, and I agree with Christy as well on this point, that if you want private investment to flow, Vashi, then the key is not just what's on the list, the 10 or 12 feet, but to have it flow to 500 projects that are waiting in the wings. You need to deal with the legislative framework to make sure that there's not all these impediments that are still in place. It's one thing to say, well, we've got Bill C5 and we can cherry pick which projects can go forward that don't have to have that regulatory burden. Why have the regulatory burden in the first place is what I'd ask.
That is a really crucial point as well. Everybody's so focused on these projects, the list of what the government selected is going to help us in some way, shape, or form, all of which were already well along the way, many of which already passed Indigenous consultations, blah, blah, blah. It's not a list. The real list would be, we're going to repeal all of these things that are making investors flee our country, that have made people lose trust with us. And now look at our list of 1,000 new things happening in the country that are going to be breaking ground next week, in a month. That would be the real list. This is just, it's just BS. It's just embarrassing, actually.
Many who swung to the Liberals in their last minute of the election. What is your message to them to gain their support?
Well, the first thing is that a lot of our seniors are struggling to pay for their groceries. That they notice the food prices are rising faster than their pensions, and their fixed incomes make it impossible for them to have the life that they were promised. Unfortunately, many of them are stuck working longer in order to pay for the rising cost of living. Conservatives are the only party that are going to make life affordable for our seniors, but also you want your grandkids to do well. You want your grandkids to have the same opportunities that you have. And I would encourage every retired person who has grandkids to ask them how they're doing. Ask them how their lives are. Ask them how their rent is, whether they can afford to pay their bills. And you might have been poking and prodding them to give you great grandkids. You might ask them the reason why they haven't been able to settle down and buy a home. Many of them do want to. I meet a lot of young people who say they want to get married to have kids, and they simply can't afford it. There would be no place to raise those kids. So these are things that we used to take for granted in Canada, but I think all of our grandparents need to reflect on the opportunities that this country supplied so many generations and make sure that your grandkids have those opportunities as well.
For many weeks, daily, as well as many months and years, the Liberal Party, their supporters, their pundits, as well as the establishment, the legacy media, has been doing everything in their power to dissuade you away from supporting Pierre Poilievre, which honestly just makes me laugh because, critical thinking here, my friends. Does anybody realize that if Pierre Poilievre was actually a terrible leader, they would want him to stay on, right? They actually probably wouldn't be calling for all of this discontent within the party. They wouldn't be questioning his leadership. They wouldn't be fabricating all of this division to try to make people vote differently so that he was removed. If he was actually a bad leader, they would want him to stay on, and they would just watch that sink slowly ship, and the media would be talking about all of the Liberals' incredible accomplishments. They wouldn't be focusing on Pierre Poilievre and how bad things are, because him being bad is a good thing for the Liberal Party. It's a good thing if he's terrible, right? Because people will naturally stop paying attention to him because he sucks. They would pay no attention to him, similarly to how they pay no attention to the Bloc, the NDP, and the Green Party. But that's not the case with the Conservatives, is it? Which is pretty interesting. And I have a feeling it might have nothing to do with Pierre Poilievre being a bad leader and everything to do with this.
Another area of good news in that we won the youth vote this last election. And not only that, the Elections Canada held a mock election in the high schools across Canada, and Conservatives finished first. In other words, I don't know if that's ever happened before. And, I think Churchill said, if you're not a conservative, if you're not a liberal at 20, you have no heart. If you're not a conservative 50, you have no brain. I've never believed that to be true, but I was thrilled to see that the next tranche of eligible voters, many of whom will have gone from being too young to vote to old enough by the time the next election happens, could put Conservatives by a long shot as their preference. And I think it's very clear. The young people today are the hardest working and have sacrificed the most of any generation since the Second World War.
If there's anything we can be absolutely certain about, it's that Pierre Poilievre isn't getting attacked and smeared, and all this division isn't being orchestrated because he's just a really mean, bad guy. No. Look a little deeper. That's all happening because it's very likely an election is going to be called before the end of Mark Carney's term is set to be. It's more than likely. And Pierre Poilievre is a very real threat. And actually, to point to how more than likely it is, this just came out today. The PBO, that guy that they want to fire because he doesn't have enough tact, apparently, he has released a report, or they have released a report that reveals Mark Carney lied about $94 billion in operating costs. So he instead labeled that spending as investment to give the appearance of a more balanced budget. But it's not. It's not investment. He cooked the books, which is something we've all been saying for a very long time. I'm Jasmine Lane. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Be sure to subscribe, like, share, comment your thoughts down below. And I don't remember what I was going to say. Have a great day.